You are listening to the sounds of the Right On Network.
Hello and welcome to episode 10 of On the Record Jams, brought to you by the Right On Network. I'm AJ and along with me is Arthur. Hello, Arthur.
It's been a while, man. I had a little detour a couple of weeks ago. Wasn't feeling so great, but now I'm back up and running, and it's time for episode 10. Can you believe that?
I can't believe it. We're 10 episodes deep. I believe we started this in August of 2024.
Yes.
And now we're in 2025. And Arthur, one of the reasons why we are 10 episodes deep, we were able to make it to that magic number is because of our Patreon subscribers. Woo! Yes. These are folks that went to patreon.com/rightonNetwork, and they're helping us stay afloat. They're helping us with the overhead, and we appreciate your support, and people writing in. Thanks a lot. You can hit us up at ontherecordjams@gmail.com. I want to start off by thanking Alan Wright. He's bold outlaw. He's a Robin Hood enthusiast. You can also hear him on the Right On Network talking about Straight Out of the Federation of Blake 7 podcast. We have DJ Merc, M-E-R-C. He's the sound of the Right On Network. That was the music you were listening to for the intro, and you'll hear that music on the outro. Delvin Sims, DJ Merc, M-E-R-C. Check out his music at Apple Music. We have the podcrasher himself, Tim Price. You can hear him on the Outcasters podcast, talking about Batman and the Outsiders, as well as the Cassandra Cain, a Batgirl podcast. We have friend of the Right On Network, Cluck Trent. We have Mark Blair, hear him at Feathers and Foes, as well as Mountain Flower One. That's Laurel Phillips. You can hear her at Feathers and Foes, a Birds of Prey podcast, as well as the Huntress podcast. We have over in Australia, Paul Hicks. He does Waiting for Doom, DCOCD, The Gary Show, and Dial Left for Flanger. Good man, Paul Hicks is. We have over at the Fire and Water Podcast Network, The Irredeemable Shag. He does Once Upon a Geek, Justice League International, Bwahaha podcast, Who's Revisited, and a podcast that's near and dear to me, Justice Society of America presents Justice Society of America in the 1990s. And be on the lookout for J.S. April. That's coming in April, and it's a bunch of podcasters and bloggers coming together to celebrate 85 years of the Justice Society of America, the world's first superhero team ever. Justin Steiner at Shoefly Pie on Substack. He blogs about music. Shoefly Pie, Justin Steiner. I know he does a lot of power pop, the late 90s, early 2000s. Justin Steiner. We have Rick from Jeff and Rick Present. Chris Pine 1. Hello, Chris. Hope you're listening to this. We know you're listening to the Manhattan Project, where April 5K and myself talk about Seinfeld and Friends. Speaking of April 5K, she's also a contributor, a Patreon subscriber. April 5K. Check her out on Straight Out of the Federation of Blake 7 podcast, as well as the Manhattan Project, talking about Friends and Seinfeld. We have Bill Beer of The Bat Pod. He does great coverage about Batman and Friends. And we have a new Patreon subscriber, and that is Jordan Holt. Jordan, what's up? Ha-ha! Thank you. Truly appreciate this, guys. Again, you're helping us out. We have this new-ish podcast, On the Record Jams. We made it to 10 episodes, and we're going beyond, and 90% of it is because of you, our Patreon subscribers. Thank you, guys. So, Arthur, all right, so I'm going to submit something for the record for episode 10. I want to go back to the doo-wop girl groups, and this is by the Chiffons, He's So Fine. That record, you ever heard of it?
Do-lang, of course, yeah. It's one of those records that was... what's the word? Ubiquitous. Like, as kids, I know we heard this song. The song was everywhere. And I don't know if I ever knew who the artist was, really ever. But yeah, I heard the song a million times growing up as a kid.
So yeah, you and I, we are men of a certain age. So when we were growing up, we were bombarded by the 1950s into the 1960s. And Vietnam being the backdrop, and then black and white 1950s TV shows and movies. So this song, He's So Fine, like you were saying, Tulane, this was in the backdrop, like you said, ubiquitous. It's kind of like the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s of pop music when I was growing up, right? This being the soundtrack in the background. So this is the Chiffons. They're out of the Bronx, the borough of the Bronx, birthplace of hip hop, where the Yankees play. And the one thing I like about this record is it's not polished and clean from my point of view. And that's one of the things I really, really like. We'll talk more about that later. But this is always fun to me. It starts off with Judy Craig, Patricia Bennett, and Barbara Lee, who were all at the same high school. So that's always fun. It's like, hey, we grew up together. And we have the songwriter Ronnie Mack, who wrote the song He's So Fine and pitched it to them to perform. And the cool thing about this song is it's barely over 2 minutes. And it's pretty much giving the blueprint of, hey, this is how you can do pop music. And they're doing some of my favorite things, Arthur, where like I'm a sucker for background vocals. Now, I love overproduced, polished records. I have no problem with that. I do like that you hear their dialect and their personalities within the background vocals. Like there's a lot of times where folks, they'll do background vocals and the backup singers, they all sound like the same person. And that's great. That's cool. That's wonderful. You nailed it. But with this, I feel like I could hear the individuals in it, and that always makes me happy. So the Chiffons, this is the early 60s. So a lot of musicians are going to hear this and it's going to be very influential. You know, as you were listening to this record for this podcast, what are some of your thoughts, Arthur?
Yeah, I think you hear it. I think you get that timestamp tells you like, hey, this was ahead of its time. And a lot of people made a lot of hits, in some cases directly inspired by this song, where you just kind of catch the vibe and the groove of everything. Like you talk about the management of how the background vocals are coming in, the way the drums are handled. And it's just, like you said, it's one of those seminal blueprint records. And then people come in and say, man, if we can do this, okay, I think we can figure this out. And now we have to do our version of this song and get our version of this group. And we see how we could do with that.
It seems like, okay, so you listen to their other songs, and of course they're doing doo-wop, and that's going to go back to the previous decade, 1950s. It seems like this record in particular is kind of knocking some of that dust off and going forward into the future. I'm going to talk more about that. Here are the lyrics to this one. It's He's So Fine, and we get the background vocals, do-lane, do-lane, do-lane. Wish he were mine, that handsome boy over there, the one with the wavy hair. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to make him mine. He's the envy of all the girls. It's just a matter of time. He's soft-spoken. He's a soft-spoken guy. Also seems kind of shy. Makes me wonder if should even give him a try. But then I know he can't shy. He can't shy away forever. And I'm going to make him mine. It's if it takes me forever. Then boom, we get the bridge middle 8 section. He's so fine. Oh yeah, I gotta be mine. Oh yeah, sooner or later. I hope it's not later. We gotta get together. Then sooner the better. I just can't wait. I just can't wait to be held in his arms. Boom. Out the middle 8 section, back to the song. If I were a queen, he asked me to leave my throne, I'd do anything that he'd ask. Anything to make him my own. For he's so fine, so fine, so fine. So fine, so fine. And we are out. Yeah, this this is one of those songs out there where, you know, of course it's short, but I could play this on repeat 7 times and then go on about my day.
Yeah, that makes sense that you could, because it's a quick listen. It's a fun listen. The Dulang holding everything together in the background. It's a really fun record to move through. And it kind of matches with some of the stuff that we talked about with the Supremes as well. Like that tinge of desperation and, hey, this guy's so great, I would do something that I probably shouldn't do. You know, like in this specific song, you're talking about, hey, if I were a queen and he asked me to leave my throne, I'll go ahead and do that. It's like, wait a minute. Like this guy must be the greatest thing going if I'm leaving a throne for this guy. So like that is always interesting in that period of time, 60s, mid 60s and beyond, like trying to use this song format to get the point across of how great this love interest is. Like, how do they go about doing it? And this is almost funny, right? To say, hey, I'm gonna leave my royalty to be with this guy. So I enjoyed that.
This was number 1 for 4 weeks straight. Think about that, those days where a band would have pressure to like if they released a number 1 record before, that pressure of, can we do it again?
Right.
And this sold for 1 million records. Back then, they got the gold disc. And then in the 1975, that's when they changed it with 500,000 records. That's gold. And then 1 million or more, that's platinum.
Yeah.
So they went platinum. Remember, that was a big deal too. Like, oh man, that record went gold or that went platinum. Now that's not a thing at all. It's about getting those streams, right?
Of course. And then, yeah, people holler out some crazy number of streams where you're like, how is that even possible that many people listen to this album or this one song this many times? It's like, man, there's got to be some bots mixed in there somewhere, right? But then you say that too loud and somebody knocks on your door, so you gotta be careful with that. But
I'm not going to be careful with it because I believe that many people listening to it now, that's totally doable because these folks are reachable. Whereas with the Chiffons, where we are these young ladies coming out of the Bronx, where music is regional, they started touring and they said like they pretty much just toured the East Coast. How just pretty much the tri-state area. They're not going down to Texas, going to St. Louis, maybe make St. Louis and back, but they're not going all the way to California too much later. So it's going to be one of those things where, yeah, when they release He's So Fine, because of record industry type stuff and deals, they went under the name The Four Pennies and did some other music. And then when He's So Fine became more of a bigger success, they're like, okay, well, let's just stick with the Chiffons.
You do make a good point,
now,
right? You think about this is pre color TV. This is pre cable. Obviously, that means it's even pre cassette tape. You're talking like this is forever ago.
This is pre Kennedy assassination.
Yes.
It's within the same year, but just imagine.
Yeah, the world is a much larger place at this time, for sure.
So it's just a big deal that these girls coming out of Madison High School from the Bronx is, like we're saying, we're kids growing up in the 80s, and their music is the backdrop of our lives as baby boomers are getting older and they're deciding what will be in media. And they're like, yeah, we're going to pay royalties for that Chiffon song because I want that in the movie where when this actor is a 7-year-old kid and he's running around that 57 Chevy, the Chiffons are playing in the background. Now, I was doing some research and I was like, okay, I was like, is this clear to me? I tried to reread it where Little Shop of Horrors was a musical in 1960. And that's where they got the name from. I was like, wait a minute, Little Shop of Horrors was from back then? Because I remember it was when the Chicago Bears won the Super Bowl. They did Super Bowl Shuffle. And my brother and I, we were going to go to the movies, and we had our choice. Either watch Golden Child or Little Shop of Horrors. And I chose Little Shop of Horrors. And then later I saw Golden Child, and I was like, I didn't regret that choice because Little Shop of Horrors, that's awesome. And Golden Child is awesome as well. But yeah, it makes a lot of sense because they had the trio girl group doo-wop in that as well. Tisha Campbell, what have you, right?
Yeah, I remember that one real clear, man. You talking Rick Moranis. You talking about Feed Me.
Steve Martin.
I go out of my way to reference that movie like in all the wrong audiences every time I get a chance. Because, I saw that movie as a kid, and it like had a big impact on me.
And now it's made a big comeback as far as like touring and being played live, because at the end of the day, I mean, it is a horror movie. Feed Me. Does it have to be human? Feed Me. Does it have to be mine? Yeah. The Chiffons. So, I mean, and I guess there's this situation with the lawsuit, right?
Yeah.
So, George Harrison, he releases the record, My Sweet Lord. And you can't help but go, dude, you lifted this from the Chiffons, from Ronnie Mack, that's giving you the blueprint of how to do a pop song in the modern age. He's so fine. So the thing is, like, I didn't grow up with Beatles music in the household when I was a kid. I came into the Beatles much, much later. And the one thing about kind of learning about them from scratch, I feel like it's easy to do because they're kind of cartoon characters. And their story is just, it seems like it's kind of easy to tell. But maybe everyone's story is easy to tell if enough people are steady retelling it and working on crafting it up. But I just feel like the Beatles' history is just easy to learn. And one thing about them is, like, you can see them, they're warming up, they're trying to get right, and they're doing Smokey Robinson. He's really got a hold on me to get them, in tune. They're going to, warm up doing that. And they always have these kind of like, okay, how can I get out of this jam? And I'm going to fall back on this. So like in the early days, when they're doing the background vocals, they're doing a lot of background vocals like this song, where they're making themselves sound like a girl group. And even in their later years, like when you listen to Happiness is a Warm Gun, the way John Lennon, he's in the studio by himself doing the background vocals, it sounds like this. Like it sounds like a girl group. And when you watch the Get Back documentary that Peter Jackson cleaned up, when they're doing my favorite Beatles song, Don't Let Me Down, and you seeing them rehearsing it and kind of working it out, it's they do this part where it's not in the song, but it's how they, like, when they're trying to draft this thing up, and John Lennon is doing a line, and Paul McCartney and George Harrison, they're doing these background vocals, like doing like a call and response to them. And the way that they do it, it sounds like the Chiffons. Like, it sounds like a girl group. Because it's kind of like, well, when we were younger, this is what we would listen to. So that's going to be in our psyche. And I think this is, because I don't know the technicality of music, so I'm not able to explain this well. I just think that this song, He's So Fine, it's just so fundamental. I guess you couldn't help but lift it. Now, I understand that George Harrison is trying to win the case, but the thing is, George Harrison didn't pull no Lenny Kravitz, where it's like, hey, I'm producing myself and I'm playing the instruments. He got a number of people walking in there, and on the All Things Must Pass, the triple album, when they're doing My Sweet Lord, the dude that's producing it is Phil Spector, a dude that's working with girl groups. So y'all know what y'all did. You know what you were doing. Right. But I don't fault them, because how can you not? And I think that My Sweet Lord is an awesome record, but we just knew that this had to be in the conversation, right?
Right. And you use the legalese term. What did they say? Subconscious plagiarism.
Yeah. How can you not subconsciously plagiarize a song?
Yeah.
How could you
And
not?
it's like, yeah, it was inside you, but it's like, man, it's so close. You're like, dude, you telling me it didn't cross your mind at all when you were making it? Yeah, I think they just got. I think they just tried to slide it on through and it didn't work.
And they talk, okay, so, and again, with, you got those singers where it's like, I can hit the notes. I can pull all of this off. And then you have folks like, hey, George Harrison, where I'm not the best singer, but, I write meaningful lyrics. And when I sing this stuff, like I really mean it, that pulls it off. And I like this He's So Fine record because it's great singing going on in it. But to me, and it just also feels like real people are doing it. Like I feel like I'm at the church choir and these women that I think like, man, the women at this church, they sing way better than folks on America's Got Talent. They sing way better than that, than in their sleep than these folks that's on the top 40. And I feel like that's what we're getting with this record. And that's why I wanted to mention it, because I don't know. I think He's So Fine by the Chiffons, I just think it's fundamental. I just think it's ABC 1, 2, 3.
Yep. And I mean, you can see it. I mean, we have that one example with George Harrison, but I mean, there's other records where you can kind of feel it. You can feel the influence. It's just not as obvious. There's no way that people didn't hear this record and say, man, I think we could do this.
I didn't know who the Chiffons were when I was a kid. And I didn't know that He's So Fine and Hey Now My Boyfriend's Back. I didn't know that was the same group.
No.
And I think that record is like, I don't know, just again, the call and response, background vocals, the background singers are actually different people, and it's not just the lead singer doing the background vocals. And you can hear the individualism within them. I don't know. I'm going to be a mark for that every time, Arthur. The only thing that this record could have added that made me just levitate off my seat is if there were hand claps.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah.
There is no hand clap.
I don't need a hand clap. Yeah, I don't need a hand clap, but I'm just saying if they did, then my head would have exploded.
Yeah, that would have been something else right there.
Final thoughts, Arthur, about this one, the Chiffons.
I think it's good that we got this one in here, man, because they're kind of, again, they're ahead of their time. They're in an era where they could easily get left, but we're fortunate enough that we grew up in a time where, like you said, once the tastemakers and the showrunners got their piece of power, part of what they did with it is they licensed this song and they made this song have, multiple additional lives. I mean, and this was, for this to happen for us in the 80s, this was before hip hop and sampling serves to do the same thing with songs all the time. Like, it's something that I really love about hip hop, where you bring all of this music back into a second life. And a person like me that wants to know what the sample is, I'll go find those records and I'm like, oh my goodness, like these people are putting something together. But before that, you almost needed the licensing. You needed a song to pop up on a commercial, or a movie or a TV show or something. And we were really fortunate that this is one of the ones we got.
Yeah, the Chiffons, He's So Fine, and the singer of the songwriter Ronnie Mack, who passed away shortly after this.
Yeah, lymphoma, of course, unfortunately. 23 years old, man.
Who knows what all we would have gotten if he would have continued living.
Right.
Yeah, because his contribution with just this one song. I mean, the All Things Must Pass, George Harrison first solo album, highly celebrated. The My Sweet Lord, highly celebrated. And it comes off the back of this one song here. So, like, what else could Ronnie Mac have given us? Yeah, well, hey, the Chiffons, I definitely will be listening to more Chiffon records going forward in my life. So, guys, please hit us up at On The Record Jams if you have any type of relationship with this record, the Chiffons, He's So Fine. I would like to hear your thoughts about this, especially if, like, there's a lot of folks, they're telling us that they're listening to the segment, they're going and listen to the record and then coming back and listen to the second segment. So yeah, definitely leave us a line. So don't go anywhere. I'm going to play this promo about J.S. April, and we're going to come back and see what Arthur's putting on the record.
Back in 1940, 8 sensational heroes united to create the world's very first superhero team, the Justice Society of America. Now, 85 years later, we're gathering podcasters and bloggers from around the globe for a month-long celebration in an event we're calling J.S. April. Throughout April 2025, join dozens and dozens of podcasters and bloggers as they each share their own unique tributes to the original and greatest superhero team. Get ready for an all-star month of beloved characters, fascinating insights, and incredible stories. Follow the action on social media with the hashtag JSApril, and visit our website for a complete list of participating podcasters, bloggers, and what they're each covering at fireandwaterpodcast.com/JSApril.
Hey guys, episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of On The Record Jams. We are back, Arthur and AJ, as it was written, as it was predicted. Arthur, what are you putting on the record this time?
I've shown a lot of restraint. It took till 10 episodes for me to bring up a Tupac song. I cheated by doing a lot of Kendrick Lamar stuff. So I view those as, Kendrick Lamar as a direct descendant of Tupac. But I'm doing Tupac, episode 10, and I'm going to go with 1995's Dear Mama.
Yeah.
What a song, man. This guy was 23 when this song came out. He was 25 when he died. And you hear a lot of words now from whether it be the therapy universe or the self-help universe. You hear phrases like perspective. And for somebody to be in the middle of like a life that was going to end so soon, and for him to have the perspective or the thought to say, hey, I'm this rapper, entertainer person. I'm dealing with brush ups with the law. I'm getting shot. I'm basically incapable of managing relationships with friends, other rappers, you name it, family stuff. And for some reason, this guy decides in the middle of all of this to say, man, apparently he had the sample for this song. So the Joe sample in My Wildest Dreams, like that record was available to him and he had been trying to write something to it. And what he ended up writing was Dear Mama, this song that ends up becoming like kind of a barometer song to say, if you're a rapper and you're going to call yourself making some kind of record where you talk about your relationship with a parent or a sibling or anybody, it's going to be immediately compared to Dear Mama. And that's, considering we're going on 30 years ago, because that's the point we're at in time and space, where Tupac died at the end of 96 and Dear Mama is from Me Against the World, and that is 1995. And we're talking 30 years, man, and you can still hear that record. And I think you and I were talking about it before we started recording here in chats. It's like, man, this still sounds like a modern, kind of almost like a timeless record. Like there's not an era where it wouldn't have worked, just because the context and the content of the record is just, it's hard to beat. It's hard to get around because it's so personal. It's so individual. But at the same time, it speaks to what a lot of kids and people unfortunately had to go through, you know, in their formative years. So it's just I know for me as a teenager and my upbringing being, you know, in a whole different planet from this record blew my mind at the time. To just hear some 23-year-old dude going on and on about all these things that he went through, and him having some kind of opinion about it, and him having the perspective to say, man, stuff has been crazy and I don't know if I'm doing everything right. I have no idea how the rest of my life is going to go. But man, I just want to make sure in the middle of all this that, you know, you're my mom and I appreciate you and I appreciate everything you did. And like the whole going into the chorus, that refrain, like there's no way I can pay you back, but my plan is to show you that I understand. You are appreciated, like basically coming right to her with it and saying, hey, this is my record to you. Like I could make another record about how cool my friends are or how great a rapper I am, but now I'm going to take a song to talk directly to my mom in, you know, painstaking detail. Like, man, it's really just a really great record. And it's been recognized as such in the years since then to really for people to understand that the art form of hip hop, every record doesn't need to be this record, but it tells you something about the art form that somebody could, like something like this is possible. Like it should say a lot about what hip hop is capable of.
So, you know, full disclosure, I've never been a Tupac fan, right? I have to say, like, even back then, even now, this is one of the most powerful records ever. And at the end of the day, even back then and even now, I've recognized that Tupac had a number of, like, man, powerful, will stand the test of time records. So one, just his life in general, just the profile itself is just is mythical, is mystical. Like all the mystique that goes with him, it makes this record even more powerful. That doesn't need to happen, but just this, you know, at the very beginning, you get kind of a background of their relationship, right? With hearing his mom speak, correct?
Yeah. When you go into that video where she explains in the narrative of the video that she was pregnant with him while she was in jail and was wondering if she would get out of jail in time enough to deliver the baby. And so it's crazy to think, again, this is how this guy's life starts. Like as he's in the womb, his mom is in prison. And then it starts from there, and somehow even from there it manages to get crazier and crazier. What this kid went through to end up being whatever people think Tupac was and is.
America has a lot of like quintessential essential stories, and this is one of them. So like just the life of Tupac himself, what's going on in this record, you know, and of course, like he has the voice. This is a generational talent, right? Like, you know, people, they kind of use that term. This is a generational talent. And I think one of the reasons why this record is timeless is because even for that time, it felt like a throwback. And then you have this kind of modern voice on it. And even, I think even in 2025, where music is just different, syncopation or whatever is just different, yet this still will hold. Like I can't see throwing this on and someone going like, oh, I just don't get it. I don't like I'm telling you, like I'm not a Tupac fan. But even with this, I'm like, man, this is powerful. Like I listened to this a couple of times just specifically for this podcast. And I'm like, this is powerful. You know, so just think about that. He has the charisma. He has the voice. He has the storytelling. And you got to remember, like, again, these gifts, like what in the heck? This guy is a writer, great actor, right? So it's like, it's all these things going on. And back then in the 90s, because there was gatekeeping, you wanted to appear older. So that's where you're going to get B.I.G., Big This, right? You want to sound older so you could be a part of what was going on. And now, because it's like, hey, man, you know what? Gatekeeping, you don't really want to do that. So it's little this, young that, little this. So, and I get that I was younger, but you would have thought like, man, Tupac and Biggie, they were at least 38, 35, 39, right? No, like you were saying, like, no, dude, they passed away at 25. Same thing with Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, where you're like, so what, they died like at 46, 47? No, man. Yeah. They died way younger than that. So again, it's that whole thing of what could have been achieved. And just the whole thing, like, the mystique that surrounds Tupac is just the whole thing of, man, did he know? Because he was prolific with all the records. And then posthumously, when he died, all the records that came out after that. So it's like, and the fact that, it was like he was more than just ahead of his time, but like, I can see where the culture is going. So I'm going to just throw this out there, and then you guys are going to bump into this later. But just a whole thing of waking up people to what folks weren't talking about at the time, like Illuminati, Machiavelli. Like it's a lot going on with this guy, right?
Right. Yeah.
And also look, and here's the deal too. You know, some people, you know, they make jokes like, hey, you know, it's this MC and he's just spiritual, lyrical, miracle, spiritual. And I'm not going to lie. I love that. But then you want to ask this guy that's an MC, but can you put a record together? And that's what this dude is doing nonstop.
Right, repeatedly. And then it's also very interesting because you think about, we talk about inspirational, we're talking about those types of things. And the thing that people talk about with Tupac a lot is, you mentioned it too, the prolific, the multiple records. This guy died at 25 and had like 400 songs. And a lot of it, when you listen to people talk about him recording, it was like, hey, this stuff is inside of me. And I'm just, man, the beat comes on, I put this stuff out. Even when he talks about him writing this Dear Mama record, he goes out of his way to say, hey, look, man, I wanted to get the point across to my mom. Like, I wrote this for my mom, and it ended up being something that other people could take something from. But I had no intention of making this tricky at all. Like, I wanted this to be a direct hit type of record to talk to my mom about our relationship, which was estranged and up and down, as, you know, he talks about the things his mom went through and how you can imagine those types of issues would put you in a bad place with your mom. And essentially, I mean, the piece with her was, yeah, there was drug addiction, There was also the sad story of her, you want to call it maybe mismanaging relationships. So the guy that was actually Tupac's father wasn't the guy that she was with. And so that's how you get this whole verse, where Tupac is saying, this is the second verse, right? Like ain't nobody tell us it was fair. No love for my daddy because the coward wasn't there. Well, he's talking about the guy who his mom was with. And the guy left basically when Afeni had Tupac, and then it was abundantly clear that Tupac wasn't his biological son. So essentially he left. But from a Tupac standpoint, he's like, man, hey, this guy was supposed to be my dad and he just opted out. So he's like, yeah, ain't nobody tell us it was fair. No love for my daddy because the coward wasn't there. He passed away and I didn't cry because my anger wouldn't let me feel for a stranger. Like, this is like a couple of lines in the middle of this song. Is not necessarily having anything to do with his mom, but like, how strong of a statement is that? And like, us being fortunate to grow up, you and I, with our dads. And like, yeah. I'm sitting there at my house as a teenager, listening to this dude talk about like, hey man, like the guy that I thought was my dad just didn't be a dad to me. And when he died, like, I didn't feel anything because he wasn't there for me when I needed a dad. And it's like, man, this is in the middle of this song. Like, how can you, like, it's such a deep thing. And again, when you talk about the power and the potential of what hip hop can be, again, everybody doesn't need to do this on every song. But the fact that this guy did this on this song, it's gotta mean something. It's gotta matter. And I think sometimes when we get into the algorithms and the album sales, and when an artist starts selling a bunch of records and they become a product and people want to make you a character. And I think what happened with Tupac is he was very much made into a character. And in my mind, being the type of person that, like, I grew up with the record player next to my head, listening to Thriller over and over, whatever albums that I had, whatever 45s that I had. So music was a part of my life as a kid. And you just listen to the same stuff over and over and over again because it's not like now where you have access to a million songs and you could just jump to the next thing as soon as you think of whatever you want the next thing to be. Or you have curated playlists to tell you what to listen to next. You listen to one song, say, go ahead and create me a playlist off of this one song. And now you can be all over the place out of nowhere. Like, no, and in this period of time, man, 95, like, I remember going to the store with my friends at the mall and having to decide, hey, am I getting Me Against the World? Am I getting DJ Quick, Safe and Sound? Am I getting, what am I getting? And having to decide what to get. And I'm like, man, I got to get this Tupac, dude. I got to try it. And I'll get to DJ Quick later. And it's like, am I going to ride my bike to this place to get it? Yeah. And you got to go into the store and you got to hope it's on sale. And in this case, I hadn't switched over to CDs yet. So we're still talking about on tape. And so, yeah, you get the tape. So you're listening to these songs. You're listening to the record. You're flipping over to the other side. And this was at the beginning of the second side, I remember, right? And it's like, it comes with this. And I'm like, man, this is insane. So, like, you're paying attention. You're hearing the lyrics. I'm sorry, Arthur. So, okay. So you bought this album at the time? Oh, yeah. So you bought this like right out the gate when it was released? Like, maybe not release date, but during that period of time, you go to the mall often enough. So in other words, I heard it in the period of time that it was released, the whole album. So did you hear Dear Mama before it was a single? I believe so, if I remember right.
So
I just got to remember when that album came out. But yeah, I heard it with the album. So that
came out of nowhere for you. So you listened to the album because maybe something else was the first single. So you're like, okay, I'm listening to this whole thing because we're old. So this has been a time where you're like, I bought this collection of songs. It's an album. And chances are nothing leaked. They didn't leak this cassette tape. They didn't leak this 8-track. So I haven't heard these other songs. So Dear Mama hit you out of nowhere.
I'm trying to go look and see exactly because there's a chance that I saw the video first. I just got to look and see when the single got released. But either way, I was still just blown away by this song. And then this is another case of you talk about hearing a song within the context of the album. Where this song sits on the album is also kind of crazy because there's like, this doesn't match the rest of that album. Like the first side, like there's just, gangster talk and threats and all that and So Many Tears and all that stuff. It's like a really hard album. And then you get to the end of the first side and then you flip it over and then you get Dear Mama. And then right after that, you get a song called It Ain't Easy Being Me, where he's talking about going to jail. And like, I don't know what's going on. And then it's like the way the album is ordered really makes this song the centerpiece of the album. So even if you heard it before, hearing it in the context of the album kind of gives it a whole nother thing.
March 14th, 1995. Woo.
Yeah. Almost
out of
30
the gutter
years ago.
records.
Just unbelievable, man.
I remember this. I mean, where we were, Arthur, this was everywhere.
Yeah.
This record, this album, Me Against the World, it was everywhere.
Yeah, and rightfully so, right? Because it was this was supposed to be his Swinging for the Fences album. And yeah, how about it? I mean, he's got raps galore. He's got singles. He's got every kind of sample you could think of. And with him being kind of an amalgamation of a lot of different things in hip hop, he wasn't going to always have the same type of samples. But man, he was one of these artists. Again, I'm a sucker for samples too, just for what it does for my love of that music. Like his samples are all over the place. So it's instrumental jazz, it's funk, it's 80s Jerry Curl music, it's 70s stuff. It could be anything. Like his producers are all over the place. And so even if you just think about even on the next album that he made, which was All Eyes on Me, I mean, he sampled Kool and the Gang, but he didn't sample like Ladies Night Kool and the Gang. He sampled like funk jam band Kool and the Gang. So Winter Sadness, you check that out if you haven't heard Winter Sadness. But yeah, I mean, he sampled that song. And it's like, oh man, this guy's producers are all over the place. And he had enough of an appreciation for the music to be like, yeah, I can go over this. Yeah, I can bring this out. Yeah, I can do something good with this. And yeah, it's hard to, especially having listened to it at the time the music came out, it's really hard to overestimate what a big deal this guy was musically in the context of which his music came out. And as a fan of him, like what a gut punch it was when he died. To the point where he became like an Elvis figure and people tried to tell themselves that this guy didn't really die.
And that he was spotted places and that he was still releasing albums and
he
became an Elvis figure.
And it's like, there's no way he could be dead because it's just so inconvenient for him to be this type of artist and this type of thing that people were really ready to turn him into. And yeah, he had all these great things inside of him. But again, like this song And his career and his life is supposed to be like a cautionary tale. Like, man, this is what happens when kids come into tumultuous situations and don't get taken care of. And even if there are these bright lights with all this talent and all these gifts, things can go so wrong. Like Tupac got killed and Biggie got killed. And these guys were like so important to hip hop when hip hop was trying to figure out what its next universe and what is next. It was getting too big for what it was, right? Like the mid 90s was like, man, these guys are selling millions of records. Rappers are getting 3 and 4 videos. This is unheard of. What's going on? Man, these guys got the nerve to be making double CDs now. Like, you think about it, like Tupac made a double CD, so of course Biggie had to counter and say, I'm gonna make a double CD. And then in the background, our favorite group, Wu-Tang, was like, well, if you guys can make a double CD, we're certainly gonna make a double CD. And all these other artists, like, hip hop was big enough that they could get budgets big enough to make super expensive videos, or to do, like, it's just hard to try to get people to understand, if you weren't there, like what the mid 90s was for hip hop, and to have Tupac and Big just be shot and killed and just be out of it out of nowhere. Everything was so crazy during that time and so unbelievable. And even almost 30 years later, like, I can think about this and like almost like get mad all over again. That, because you talk about what he could have done.
Yeah, that's interesting because, all right, so you get in the mid and late 80s with the hair bands, and you and I and a mutual friend, we joke about the sweet cherry pie and the women dancing on the car, right?
Yeah.
So then Kurt Cobain, he comes out with the grunge movement and like being very anti-hero, and it made it seem like those hair bands that was a joke. So then that got like thrown out of style, and then everyone was doing like the grunge thing, and like they were like disturbed and didn't want to look at the camera. So then boom, you get the rappers. Well, we'll give you that party lifestyle. We'll do sweet cherry pie and all that. So then they were like the lifestyle for the young, and that would look cool.
Right. Huh. Yeah.
They will look dangerous. They, I think it's some documentary about the Guns N' Roses where it's like the most dangerous rock band in America. And now that's what you're going to get with the rap music.
Right. Because it was just too much too fast. There's too much money flying around. Nobody has the upbringing or even frankly the protection and perspective to understand, like, there's so much people, there's so much money getting made, there's so many things going on, nobody's ready for any of this. And hey, by the way, these people come from environments where people get shot, and you had to be out of your mind looking back now to think it's almost crazy to think more of these guys didn't end up getting shot, because it was just, these guys were not ready for this level of visibility. And again, I use another word that gets thrown around a lot: trauma. These people had been through stuff. These people had incomplete, to put it as nicely as possible, incomplete upbringings where they weren't necessarily cared for. And then now they have all these resources. People care, or at least temporarily care, about what they're saying. And they're young and they're trying to figure out, how do I say something that matters, but I'm also young. So like you're saying, there's the rock star portion. Like, hey, I want to have fun with this too, because who's to say how? Because they feel it. Like you talk about, like, did this guy know he was gonna die? Because you hear the music and you hear some of the stuff he's saying, you would think, man, this guy might have almost known he wasn't long for the world, because he must have felt threatened. He must have felt in a dangerous situation, and maybe that's why he wanted to record all these songs. Maybe that's why he wanted to cover this many bases. Maybe this is why he wanted to make a song to his mom, because he thought, sheesh, I'm not going to be here to grow old and be sitting on a porch saying, you know, Mom, you were real great and I really appreciate you. He's 23 trying to make that song. Dude, when I was 23, I wasn't, man, I don't know if I had the perspective to be thinking about this type of stuff, to really be looking at my parents and truly appreciating them at the level that this guy is doing for his mom on this song. Like, I don't know if I would have had the perspective. I barely know if I had the perspective to do that now. And I've buried my dad already. And I'm thinking, man, this is a lot of things. And so you get the rock star stuff, you having a good time stuff, you got this guy questioning the universe around him out loud in the music. And so, again, as a teenager, listening to this guy go through all this on the music, he was my favorite rapper in a walk. Because it was like, this guy is this is a lot of stuff happening on these songs. Like, Me Against the World is a 15-song album. And he's covering everything. Like, he's covering death. He's covering, you know, trying to be a rock star and be out there with the women. He's talking about his upbringing. He's talking about his mom. He's talking about if he doesn't know if he's going to make it. He even took a minute to make a song about the old school where he's thinking about, hey, man, I'm in the mid 90s, but sheesh, hip hop has been around for a while. Like, hip hop had been around just long enough for these guys to be in their mid 20s reminiscing about 80s hip hop. So he's like naming off all these rappers in the 80s and quoting them and talking about how much he loves them and how great it is. And man, I wouldn't be anything if I didn't have these guys, because like, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants to even be able to do what I'm doing. And again, this guy's in his low 20s and he's got all the perspective to be thinking about this enough to put it on the songs. Easily my favorite rapper during this period of time. Because of all this stuff, because it was like he was opening my eyes to all the things that were just kind of flying around me. Yeah, I'm playing Nintendo. I'm going to class. I'm trying to graduate from high school. I'm wondering if I'm going to go to college. What college can I afford? College. You're reading comics. I'm watching Thundercats. I'm just kind of hanging out. And this guy's sitting here like, man, I don't know. I might die. Man, I sure do love old hip hop. Man, my mom was really great to me and she was going through a lot of stuff, but man, she still found a way to be great to me. And this guy's talking about all this stuff and I'm like, dude, I just want to remember what time Thundercats comes on. Like, I don't know. I'm not thinking about all this stuff. So yeah, he was kind of like an artist that helped open up my world. So I always have an appreciation for him that goes beyond, you know, the storefront version of what people think of Tupac. When you say his name, people think, oh, this stupid guy that got shot in Vegas because he was dealing with the wrong people. Hey, this guy that's talking about thug this and thug life and thug that. And again, perspective. Like, I remember being beat over the head, reading the right interviews, and this guy saying, hey, wait, guys, thug life stands for the hate you give little infants, F's everybody. So in my mind, thug life was like, holy crap, this guy's all over it. This guy's got all this stuff to say. This guy's trying to say, hey, I get it. Like, I'm in the middle of being like, I feel like I'm getting cheated and I'm still trying to live beyond it. But like, you guys got to understand, you got to stop cheating these people. You got to stop cheating these kids. You got to put these kids in better situations. This is a rapper saying all this stuff. And for whatever reason, it hit me in the right angle at the right time. And I got all of it right at the time. So I love this guy as an artist. So, yeah, oh man, just like I said, I showed a lot of restraint waiting this long to even bring him up, because this is what a big deal this guy was to me as an artist during this period of time. And even in my case, I mean, you're talking about, I was less than 5 years into just being in the point to where I could go to the store and just buy an album, right? Like, you think about that period, like Like, when did you buy your first tape or album? I know you had the benefit of an older brother that kind of was able to kind of co-opt you into stuff. But when did you buy your own tape? The first one.
My own tape? Ninth grade.
So what's that?
Made a
93? 94?
Oh, yeah, 93, 94. That's when someone gave me the Beck Odelay CD, and that was a big deal. Like, whoa, I got a CD in my hand. But okay, I'm going to buy something on my own. I believe ninth grade, a cassette tape.
Do you know what it was? Do you want to out yourself?
It probably was Nirvana. It was probably Nirvana, Nevermind, if I can remember. I think the first thing I ever had. So I can't believe that. You know what? I must have bought a CD player and was just living off my brother's stuff. And then when I was able to save up pennies, I think I bought a Nirvana cassette tape.
Right. I started with cassettes. I didn't do CDs until I got to college. So this was like fall of 96.
Wow.
Fall of 96 is when I started doing CDs. So, of course, that meant like I had to buy my favorite tapes again. So, one of the first tapes I got, and how I got it, Columbia House. One of the CDs was Me Against the World, guaranteed. One of the other ones was All Eyes on Me, guaranteed. And one of the other ones was Ready to Die. And also did Goody Mob, Soul Food. Like, I was really deep into hip hop by this time. But my first tape, I remember, it's like early 90s. It was Jodeci, Forever My Lady, because I was an R&B guy. So I was all about the R&B in the early 90s, Keith Sweat, and even what people now call the grown folk stuff, like Luther Vandross, Barry White, all of that. Like, I was into all of that because I had all of that around me all the time. Michael Jackson, Dangerous was early 90s too, so I probably bought that with my own money too. So like that's what I had. But yeah, by the time I got to 95, it was like, going to the store, picking out tapes. Me and my buddies, sometimes we would say, okay, there's 3 tapes we want. It's 3 of us. Each of us get one of the tapes and then we'll trade. And, there's no honor amongst thieves or high school dudes with no money. So sometimes we couldn't even get that together, right? Like sometimes it would be like we would have 3 albums we all wanted, but then 2 people would get one of the same album. Like, man, I got to have this Tupac now, so I'm going to listen to Tupac. Now that 3rd album that we all wanted, we had to wait till we went back to the mall like a month later. So it's just crazy to think about those periods of time where disposable income wasn't there. Like you're talking about riding a bike, getting a ride, getting to the mall, like getting your hands on music. Like we talked about this also too with the Chiffons, like how big the world was, like getting your hands on a 45 and having the means to play it and all of that. And then we fast forward like 30 years ahead to where we're talking about buying tapes and getting CDs, and you're having to get like one at a time every month because you just don't have that much money. Versus now, I think about times where 3 or 4 albums come out on Friday and I just go to my phone and I download all 4 of them. And then I just kind of spend the weekend finding time to listen to them. 3 or 4 albums, like nothing. It's just insane how available music is. And of course, at our age, it kind of puts me in that frame of mind where I'm hitting my uncle phase where I'm a little moody. And I think, hey, music is so available now. Don't tell me you didn't have a chance. Don't tell me you couldn't have listened to this. Like if an album's been out 8 months and you haven't listened to it, it's because you don't want to listen to it. Like you just didn't, like, come on. Like if it's an hour, and especially now, some of these artists are making 30-minute albums. So just slap it on when you're going to go for a walk, slap it on when you're about to go to the gym. Like, go ahead and listen to it because it's so, available. Like you think about, I'm gonna age myself again, right? You think about Circuit City and Best Buy. I remember like getting out of high school, like my last semester in high school, having early release and getting out on Tuesday morning, because during that time, albums came out on Tuesdays. Getting out Tuesday at noon and going to Circuit City and having to walk through the store and see if the album I want is already on the shelf. And sometimes it wouldn't be on the shelf already. And I would have to like go talk to somebody that worked at Circuit City and be like, hey, is that Liquid Swords out yet? Yeah, it came out today, but it's out. It's in the back. We haven't taken it out yet. And then I have to you have to have that exchange with them. Like, well, why don't you go to the back and get me one of the copies of Liquid Swords? 'Cause I've been waiting for this for months, and now it's the day. I just got out of school. I got to be at my little whatever job I had at that time. I got to be at my job at 4. It's 12:30. I want this CD where I can listen to it, or at that time, again, tapes. I want to get this tape where I can ride around and listen to it, go get something to eat, and then go to work. And I got to be at work at 4. Like, but I need you to quit messing around. I need you to get me this tape. Like that level of effort to get an album versus now just roll over on your phone at 11 o'clock Thursday night, in the time zone we're in, 11 o'clock is midnight, and you just roll over. And if you think about it, you just click the button in 30 seconds at the most, even with a slow connection, 30 seconds, this thing is downloaded to your device and ready to be consumed. It's just unreal where we're at now.
Man, I want to buy it on Tuesday because they sell it $4 cheaper.
Oh, yeah. And if you don't get it on Tuesday or Wednesday, that sale's over with. And you come rolling in there Friday and it's $15.99 instead of $11.99, man, that's a problem.
So, hey, final thoughts about Tupac's Dear Mama, Arthur.
Ah, man, I don't know how many different lyrics from this thing. I mean, I pointed out the lyric about the dad not being there and the pain that caused, and just, there's so many things. Like, the whole thing is quotable, really. It's almost just like, listen to the whole thing.
Just line for line.
Just line for line. Just listen to the whole thing. Him talking about him and his sister, and even though we had different daddies, the same drama. When things went wrong, we blame mama. I reminisce on the stress I caused. It was hell hugging on my mama from a jail cell. Like, hey, my mom was having a tough time trying to raise us, and I didn't make it any better. And again, this guy's in his low 20s, and he's got the perspective to know, like, man, my mom was going through all this stuff to try to raise me, and I didn't do right by her because I didn't do everything I was supposed to do. And I'm making a song for this lady because I feel so much appreciation and lament for how I functioned and how I acted in the situation I was in. Like, I needed to be trying to make things easier for you, and in some cases I made things harder for you. 23. He gets this. He understands this. He can articulate this in a way to put it in a song. Like, that's artistry. That's talent. That's something good. That's songwriting. Like, that's something really, really good. And again, when I talk about, I spend so much time on our show talking about people not missing out on great things. And it's like, man, don't miss out on this guy. Like, whatever you heard, whatever the worst story is, whatever the internet's going to tell you about this guy because he ended up getting killed, like, don't let that rob you of what this kid was able to do before he passed away. Because, like, again, this shows the capabilities of what hip hop could be. Because this guy's an MC. This guy's a rapper. Like, and this was just one example of, I mean, I don't know what word that you use, like a powerful, like a strong killer record that you could just listen to and be like, whoever's responsible for this is really good at what they're doing.
He's also, he's a genre within himself. Like you were saying, you hadn't talked about Tupac yet. However, you talked about Kendrick Lamar, where you're saying like he's a descendant of him.
Yeah.
But during, we always talk about like, I don't know if it was All Eyes on Me, where Tupac is giving you like every genre within that album, and then rappers thought like, oh, I guess I have to do that. Like I gotta do my West Coast record, I gotta do my East Coast record, I gotta do my party record. And so albums would sound disjointed for a while.
Right.
And then people just got back to like, hey, let me just do kind of like my thing. But yeah, he was a disruptor.
Right. He kind of created a standard that put a lot of people in bad situations. Now we got a lot of great work out of it for the artists who were great enough to do it. But yeah, I mean, All Eyes on Me, I think was something like 27 songs. And he had a lot of help putting that album together. Like people gave up their songs, people gave up their beat that they had been saving to put on their albums, and like that, like it was a lot of community that came together to get that album put out in that short order of a time. And so it's like, man, for people to hear that, and again, it's you think about learning and thinking about how business works and how entertainment sometimes just dulls the light of some of the brightest lights we've ever seen. Like people heard that album and said, we got to do that too. Instead of thinking, man, this is ridiculous. This is a lot of stuff. And maybe we don't have enough to talk about to try to do this. So maybe we shouldn't.
Because you got to also think too, this is a complicated figure where it's like, hey, I was born on the East Coast, moved to the West Coast. I'm a part of this lifestyle, but I went to school for the arts. I'm an actor, but I'm also a rapper. So that's why he's hitting you with, hey, I got this album where it's all these different modes. Now, if you're a guy where like, hey, I'm not a jack of all trades, I am the king of doing this, then, and that's cool. Instead of you trying to do 14 different things, hey, give me that 1 or 3 things really well. And I think it took a while for people to get back to that if they didn't have the versatility to do all the things.
Right. Now that's almost like a print preview, because I think we talked about this, trying to select songs for later, and I don't want to give it away, but it is a tease for what I think my next song is going to be, is one of these people that did exactly what you described. Like create a lane, figure out what you're good at, and just strike that nerve as many times as you can, as well as you can. And now
build this
works.
Loyal following that's going to ride with me to the sunset.
Right, because when they hit play, they know what it's going to be. There's not going to be any shenanigans. There's not going to be any people jumping off of bridges trying to do stuff that they can't do. It's like, no, for the most part, I have enough self-awareness. You know, y'all always laugh at me when I talk about self-awareness, but like rapper self-awareness is a big deal, because it's exactly what you talk about. Like the guys in the late and mid 90s, some of these guys didn't have self-awareness. They thought they could make these 25 song double CDs with all these, like you said, my down south record, my club record, my girl record, my street record, my mixtape record, my hey, I'm just gonna rap as hard as I can record. Like everybody didn't have the talent to do that. And now these guys, again, have the self-awareness to say, yeah, maybe I'm not even going to try to do that stuff. I have my one thing. I have my lane. I have my aesthetic. And I think I'm really good at that. So I'm going to give you 40 minutes of that across 13 songs. I'm going to click up with everybody else that does the same thing, and we're going to just do it. And we're going to get the best producers for what we do, and we're just going to hit you over the head with this as many times as you'll take it, and we're going to figure out how to sell you the same album like 10 times, and we're going to do vinyl, and we're going to do $50 t-shirts, and we're going to make our money that way, because we're not Taylor Swift. We're not going to have 3 billion streams. So we're going to get a couple of million streams, and we're going to do it this way. But that's later.
So, Arthur, where can the lovely listeners get a hold of us?
Well, we have On The Record on Facebook. We have ontherecordjams@gmail for email. We have On The Record Jams at X. We have OTJR on Bluesky. And I think that might be it for now, where people can get us at. But any of those, if you come there and you have some additional context, different things you want to tell us about anything, we've got 20 songs on the record now.
Wow.
Different genres, different eras, and I think we got some more stuff that we're really excited to talk about as we go forward. But yeah, we can keep the dialogue going, keep the conversation going. We always tell people to keep jamming, so hopefully if we're doing anything to make people jam a little bit more than they were before, maybe people were in a rut, maybe their algorithm was leading them astray, and maybe some of the stuff that we're doing is putting them back in the mood to listen to some of this other stuff. You think about it, we're bringing up, records that are in some cases 60 years old, some cases 30 years old, 20 years old, 10, 40 years old. It's like, man, to put myself in the mindset of where I was when I was listening to even Dear Mama, 30 years ago, it's like, man, it's a really nice blast to go back to those moments and put myself in that store in the mall with my buddies trying to figure out what we're going to buy, and really fun memories, man. So hopefully us doing this and sharing that is giving people an opportunity to do the same thing. Hopefully we can strike some nerves and bring up some records that put people in good places where they can reminisce about how things were when they came across these records,
Yeah, guys, keep jamming and keep your lamp light trimmed and burning. Cheers.
Absolutely.